Hi, this is Lauren Cheek from Lornicopia. Just to give you an update on what's happening to me. I'm working a lot, and the exciting news is my house is going to be used as a film set for a student film over Labor Day weekend of this year, this 2023. Anyway, the topic of today is UFOs in the news. It's kind of wild. If you're paying attention, you're going to be hearing about it. So anyway, I've worked at the same restaurant in Dunwoody. I live in the greater metropolitan Atlanta area. I've worked at this restaurant since 2005, so I've worked there for 19 years. It's August of 2023, and I am 54 years old. So anyway, in the news recently, there have been congressional meetings where they've been investigating into the UFO, USO, UAP phenomena. And an interesting thing about this is I have believed that UFOs exist, although I never saw one until last year in 2022 on Memorial Day with my own eyes. But I believed it because so many people have seen it. There are so many well-documented cases of it. And then there are others that you can't document that are just mysterious and interesting sounding. Abductions, that kind of thing. But anyway, long story short, for years, I've asked my coworkers, about every 4 years as we transition new groups of servers and cooks, etc., I always have asked them, have you ever seen a UFO? And out of all the people I've worked with, which is seriously hundreds and hundreds of people over a 19-year period, about 6 people have seen a UFO. And to give you 2 better examples, let's give you 3. There was a guy and girl that I worked with. They've been coming up from Florida, I want to say from Miami, and they saw a UFO while they were driving back up on, the main highway, which merges into 75 to come into Atlanta. Well, this area, come north. Anyway, they both had seen it. They both couldn't believe they had seen it. So it took them a few minutes for one to look at the other and go, "Did you see that?" Because they thought they would be considered crazy by the other one. Another UFO sighting by another person was a girl that I worked with when she was 12 years old. She was in Mobile, Alabama, in a trailer park visiting family. The trailer park was situated next to a farm. She saw a triangle UFO that was silent but had lights on it. The UFO came and hovered over the farmland next to the trailer park. Her and her mother saw it. It was late at night. And she said that when the UFO came close and started to hover, the farm animals started to scream. Now, if you've never heard a chicken scream or a goat scream or something like that, when an animal makes a distress call, it's weird sounding, and it's definitely obvious that they are in trouble or that they're afraid. So that was an interesting sighting. Another friend of mine was traveling out, I want to say, in the West, probably California, taking a trip, and he saw a UFO, just a regular kind of saucer-shaped UFO. He saw it 2 different times while he was taking his trip. None of these people ever claimed to be abducted or anything of that sort. They just claimed to see a UFO, an unidentified flying object that didn't look like anything that we had. And anyway, so those are the 3 instances of people that have actually seen it. That I saw one on Memorial Day weekend. I was out with a friend. I had taken the weekend off, which is unusual. We were at an Airbnb, but he had to go get his girlfriend had to go pick up her kids in Charleston, South Carolina, and I was driving home down 400. I came up the 400 overpass, which is all new this year. And as I was up elevated, getting ready to crest, and the King and Queen building were on the left, a UFO came about 6 miles ahead of me, about the height of a plane that is circling but not taxiing to enter the runway, in a circling pattern. It appeared to be. So at that height, but it came in so quickly. I was at the crest, coming up onto the crest. I looked out my window. I'm getting ready to descend the new ramp. I'm a couple of stories up. King and Queen on my left. It comes in north to south, comes in like this, and then goes whoop, just like that. It wasn't like an L. It wasn't vertical, but it looked like it was traveling 4,000, 6,000 miles per hour. It zipped in, and then it arced up and went out of sight. And this is as I was declining. By the time I had gotten home, I left there, I want to say at 5:30 in the morning, and it was an hour from my house. So I was in Dunwoody, which is 20 minutes from my house in good traffic. So by that time, it was getting closer to 6 o'clock. And by the time I got to Norcross, if you know the area, it was beginning to get gray outside, where the daylight was beginning to come up, but the sun had not risen just yet. And by the time I got home, it was sunrise. So it happened that quickly, within, a matter of seconds. So that was my only UFO experience. But my uncles who were all in the military, who served in World War II, one of my uncles served in World War II, Korea, and in Vietnam. They all believed in UFOs. They talked about it. My mother and father had read the Blue Book. They believed in UFOs, even though they had not seen one. Anyway, so this was a common thing among the military people in my family to believe in UFOs and to have read the Blue Book, which, you should know about that. If not, Google Project Blue Book. Well, lately, I have been watching a UFO documentary-based YouTube channel called Ion Cinema. And what's cool about Ion Cinema is they're doing news interview and personal testimony from people that have had various UFO encounters. And most of it is not like TV produced, manufactured. It's just one-on-one testimony from people claiming what they saw. And it's much more fascinating because it removes all of the creep factor and everything from it. You just get to listen to it analytically and draw your own conclusions. And some of my conclusions are crap. It's top secret or black op. And then other ones, I'm like, it's certainly not us, or it's a private technology that's way, way advanced. And what are they doing with it? So what convinced me personally from just not having my family say they believed in it, and it being kind of a background urban myth sort of thing to me, was when I put my glasses on so I can read this to you. I was 28 in 1997. In March 13th of 1997, there was a mass sighting of an unidentified flying object over Phoenix and Nevada that was witnessed by about 20,000 people. They called it the Phoenix Lights. It was on TV at that time. We did have cable, and those sort of things, but back in 1997, it was still common just to watch 3 networks on TV if you didn't have cable. So it was, showing up on all 3 networks during that time. And what they described was a mile-wide, triangular-shaped, boomerang-shaped UFO that was silent, that hovered over the area. And the way that the people in Phoenix determined it was a mile wide is all the grids in Phoenix are for traffic and for the city plan are a mile apart. So when it was hovering over, several people that I listened to in testimonies, and the one person that I talked to personally, he was saying they're 70 feet tall. And I want to give you an example of how close that is. Here's my tree in my front yard, and actually the neighbor's tree behind it. This tree right here is about probably 70 to 80 feet tall. The tree behind it's 120 feet tall. So trees in Phoenix and Nevada don't grow as big as they do out here. But when I think about it, I'm like, that's quite too close to being mistaken from that distance by several people to be what was claimed to be flares and what was claimed to be fighter jets flying in formation. Fighter jets make noise. Flares don't. Flares don't hold the formation that this thing held for, hours. So that was the one that convinced me, yeah, UFOs are real. Now, it could have been our technology, but where are we keeping a mile-wide vehicle and what are we doing with it? I assume that it was not ours, that it came from outer space. Another interesting story that I had heard about, and these are different ones, that mass witnessed by 20,000 people claiming to see same or similar things, claiming that it wasn't aircraft, that they were not misidentifying this from 70 feet, because I can see a squirrel or a bird in a tree with my own eyes. I have 20/20 vision from 70 feet. and even see them from 120 feet up. You know, much you get much past that, you know, it might be negotiable to see detail or be able to identify the species or the animal. Anyway, so this one was a sighting by civilians. The next one that I had watched and heard about was Commander Graham Bethune, who is a retired naval commander pilot with a top secret clearance, and he and 42 people on a plane saw a UFO off the coast of Newfoundland. You can Google Graham Bethune UFO and listen to some of his testimony. In one of the accounts that I listened to, he actually said that, well, he gave me the account. The account was they were coming towards Newfoundland. They thought they saw a city. They were too far out to be seeing a city yet. There was a glowing large object in the water, under the water. And from that object, as they came closer, came a large orb, yellow, strobing, different lights orb, that actually kind of zipped around their craft as they were coming into Newfoundland. So when they landed, they were debriefed, blah, blah, blah. But it was an open secret among military people that this UFO had been seen. And what Graham Bethune says is that other people with top secret clearances asked him if he wanted to see the bodies, you know, of the UFO inhabitants that the government had in a hangar. I want to say it was at Wright-Patterson, if I remember correctly. Anyway, that's been a rumor going around for years. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, first of all. Secondly, I've been fascinated in the UFO, like I'm fascinated with lots of things about nature and people and science and everything else. And, you know, experiences, and art, and gardening, whatever it is. I've got a wide, vast interest. But UFOs have always been in my periphery, so I'm not one of those to be like following the UFO stories and stuff closely. And for me, like I said, Eyes on Cinema has been an interesting revelation because you go back decades and decades to people saying the same things. So it's not like there's a big leak or a big disclosure. There have been things leaked for a long time. But now recently you've had Lou Elizondo, and now you have David Grush. At first I thought David Grush was just some weird plant because he said basically what Lou Elizondo said, but with more credentials, you know, more verifiable credentials. They both worked for the Pentagon, and they both supposedly worked in a para program that followed UFOs. Whereas the general approach of the government has been to disclaim, spread disinformation, dumb it down, play it down, and pretend it doesn't exist. Although people just keep seeing these things, you know. So anyway, that's interesting to me. So there's a military witness with 40 witnesses that saw the same thing that is top secret. And then there's David Grush, Lou Elizondo. There's the two Navy pilots from both coasts of the United States whose videos were leaked. What I found very interesting was right in the middle of COVID. It was shortly after New York had its explosion of COVID cases. Suddenly that's when it came out that the Pentagon verified that these videos of these Navy pilots were actually authentic, you know. And they're not just authentic, they have gauging materials and, you know, radar, sonar, things like that. And then also speed gauges that give you an idea how fast this thing is going. And you have to listen to someone that actually flies those planes, which I have on YouTube, to understand how fast these things are going. And they're going about as fast as I thought this thing was going when I saw it, which was 4,000, 6,000 miles per hour or more. And then they could just stop, and then they could go underwater, you know, without breaking up the ship. You know, we have G-forces that would just cause things to fall apart. So on that note, when I listen to abduction cases and that phenomena, I find it fascinating, but they're also very individual experiences, and they're very hard to validate. I don't say they're not real. I don't say they are real. I leave them on the back burner. What I go for is multiple witnesses, very documented cases, video footage if possible. So the next case that or experience that I have watched in the last couple of years, and they finally made a movie about it, was the aerial school sighting in Rua, Zimbabwe. That happened in September 16th, 1994, I think on a Friday afternoon. It was witnessed by 62, at least, school children. And then it was documented by John Mack, who is a psychiatrist from the United States, well known. And then they did drawings. They've all given their experience. They actually saw beings in this particular one. And a lot of people in these UFO cases will claim that they've seen beings, and they'll give descriptions, but it's one or two people. And this was actually a large number of children who drew and said they saw the same thing. So that's interesting, and I thought that was really compelling because they have the pictures. They're all much older now. They're getting in their 40s or reaching 40. They only interviewed the sixth graders because they were 12-year-olds, and they thought they were mature enough and old enough to handle what they were claiming happened to them and to be able to relay the information well. So anyway, several of those kids that are more high profile, that are more comfortable with talking about it, I follow them on Instagram. 3 of them. They're very cool. They have great jobs. They're all humanitarian type or artistic type jobs to help people in the future. But anyway, they stick to their story. So they did a documentary recently called The Aerial Phenomena, which you can watch. You can Google it. And it's the same thing as Ion Cinema. It's a more of a testimony of what people saw and what they experienced, as opposed to trying to make it all Hollywood and scary, or scary, and it gives you more of a sense of like what their sense of wonder was and what they felt like and how it's impacted the way they feel about things. But my opinion typically is that the UFO phenomena, it seems like they don't interact that much with us unless you look at cattle mutilations or abductions. I'm filming. You are in my way. Anyway, so unless it's those type of instances, which are not, they're documented, like cattle mutilations are obviously documented, but there's no footage of craft or beings or anything like that, or any witness to that. And then, of course, abduction circumstances or individual circumstances. You have to consider the person's psychiatric well-being, whether they're lying or not. It's harder to gauge that people are lying when it's 20,000 people, or it's military people that could lose their jobs and their clearances, or if it's government agents that could lose their jobs and their clearances and they're willing to disclose. So what I think that this information has been leaking for a long time. I feel like that if UFOs are aliens or if they are from an alternate dimension, which is another possibility, or both, they've been coming here for a long time. They're not really that interested in us. They're not trying to change our lives. And maybe they did in the past, and maybe that's why they don't now, because we have 3 world religions that have some interesting, miraculous, possibly technologically misunderstood, but miraculous events for the time, certainly that they could not compete with technologically, that happened, that really changed how human beings behave towards each other for good and for bad. So I would think that may be an approach that's happening here. People have been waiting for disclosure from the Pentagon, and I think given that there have been so many leaks, like I'm watching these testimonies, they're going back decades, of little leaks claiming that we have craft, claiming that we have bodies, and it wouldn't surprise me. It also wouldn't surprise me that there would not just be this overall disclosure, because, we may be trying to copy their technology and not doing it very well, but we may be working on, tech that they don't want to disclose because it leaves us vulnerable as a country. And also, it's kind of easy for it to be misconstrued as being a UFO, and then that just covers what they're doing, which is great. I mean, that's fantastic. But Yeah, I mean, obviously, some of this stuff doesn't seem to be our technology. So that's my take on the whole UFO thing. But it's fascinating what's going on right now, um, how the government is beginning to approach it, um, and that it's actually getting some serious coverage. Because, as I said, just from a basically a witness testimony uh, background, it's a phenomenon that's been happening for quite a long time, possibly thousands of years. But certainly ramped up, you know, in the last couple of decades, since the 40s, and it's interesting. It's a fascinating phenomenon, and I tend to believe that they're here and they're real. And if you're an alien watching this video, without abducting me, stunning me, or doing anything weird and freaky, I'd be interested in communicating with you. That's all I have to say in this video. Lorne Cheek from Lornicopia.